Hi, welcome back, students. This is Mr. Royer, and today we're going to be learning about economic systems, and I'm going to introduce you to the circular flow model. And you're going to be learning a lot more about that a little bit later. Today's essential questions. What are the three basic economic questions every society must answer? How do different economic systems address those three separate questions? And how does the circular flow model illustrate the market system and how it operates? We're going to be taking a look at how scarcity leads to choice, and this leads to three questions: what to produce, how to produce, and for whom do we produce. What to produce is what is actually going to be made by that society. We already illustrated the choices involved here by looking at the production possibilities curves. Scarcity leads to opportunity costs, and ultimately societies have to choose what to produce. In a market system, it's ultimately consumer demand that determines what gets made. How should it be produced? Well, are we going to use technology? Are we going to be labor intensive? Are we going to go low tech or high? Should it be the government or should it be private? In a market system, ultimately, it's the producer that determines the most efficient and cost efficient way of producing goods and services. And number three, for whom? Who gets to consume the products that are created in this economy? Is it only those who can pay for them? Is it only those who need them? Does everyone get them equally? Does the government make these choices, or do we privately make those choices? Ultimately, in a market-based system, market prices determine who gets to consume and who does not. The answer to how to fairly distribute goods in any economy is ultimately determined by how that society distributes income to the factors of production. And each of the economic systems have evolved to answer this question. The traditional system, the command system, and the market system are three different ways of organizing our economic market structures. The mixed economy is a combination of command and market systems. The traditional system doesn't really exist anymore. This is historically the barter system, and it developed through habit or custom. In these systems, people are typically self-sufficient. The only advantage is life is really predictable and stable. If your dad was the village fisherman, there's a very good chance you're going to be the village fisherman. The big weakness in this system is it discourages innovation. And since everyone is really raising or chasing food, there's going to be a low standard of living. There's very little surplus, there's very little exchange or trade going on, and these communities tend to be somewhat small and stifled. In the modern world, we organize economic systems really on two separate poles of a spectrum. If the government is making all of the choices on how goods and services are produced and who gets to consume them, we call it a command economy or planned economy. We're not going to use the word socialist or communist since these terms imply a political system. In a command system, all choices are made at the central level by the government. So in these systems, the public owns all the resources and they make all the choices about how those resources are going to be used. Now, there are some strengths here. These systems are capable of very dramatic changes in short time. They also can ensure greater equality in the distribution of goods and services, since each person is going to be given what they need. The downside is it doesn't always meet individual needs. There's no profit motive or incentive. Therefore, people will do as little as they need to get what they need. It requires a large bureaucracy, and it costs a great deal of government oversight and time, and it's not very flexible when there are changes due to market change conditions. A market system, on the other hand, is the opposite pole. Rather than publicly owned goods and services, all resources are privately owned and exchanged voluntarily. It's based on the ideas of Adam Smith on the Wealth of Nations, published back in 1776. Individuals each specialize in their own productive resources and then trade to satisfy their own self-interests. The idea is that if each person seeks their own self-interest, we will achieve the greatest common good. In order for a market economy to work, according to Smith, there are 5 things that must be present. 1, private ownership of all the resources. 2, there has to be a self-interest incentive in order to profit. 3, you must have the economic freedom to trade or not trade in the market. 4, there has to be adequate competition to prevent one person or company from taking advantage of the market. And 5th, there has to be perfect access to accurate information for both buyers and sellers in the marketplace. When all of these conditions are present, we have a true market economy, what Smith referred to as the theory of capitalism. In a market economy, resources are owned and traded privately. You are going to sell those resources in the marketplace in order to get the money income you need to buy the goods and services you want. Economists explain this through something called the circular flow model. In the circular flow model, households, which are on the right side of the model over here, sell the factors of production for money incomes. So we as households sell our labor, our land, our capital, and our entrepreneurial abilities in something called the resource or factor market. We get money income back in the form of wages, rents, interests, and profit. Each of the 4 factors of production gets its own factor payment. So when I am employed by an employer in the factor market, they are going to pay me a wage. That wage becomes my money income. And if you follow the model around the outside ring here, we take that money income and then we will spend it in the product market on the things we want. So the goods and services we want come back to us. Now there's another whole side to the circular flow model, and that of course is the business. Businesses will have to buy those resources in the factor market that the households are selling. These become the costs of production. The factors are then used to produce goods and services, which are then sold in a product market in exchange for business revenue. This whole model will be covered in great detail in a separate lesson that you'll be doing asynchronously. We will come back and talk about this again in a live lesson in the future. Now, the strengths of the free market are that it's decentralized. And since it's decentralized, it tends to be much more flexible and efficient and will adjust naturally whenever there's a change in the marketplace. There's much less waste. Individual freedom will provide incentives for working and producing, and it gives us a greater variety of goods and services due to the competition. Therefore, consumers tend to be more satisfied, and the government doesn't have to interfere or provide much oversight, which makes it more efficient and less costly. There are, however, problems with market systems. It only rewards the most productive resources, which often leads to an unequal distribution of wealth in a society. It can also result in a series of market failures. We'll learn about these market failures in more detail later in the course. But what are some examples? Well, 1, maybe we don't have all the accurate information we need to make an informed choice. 2, public goods are often underproduced, things like public education or public health care. And 3, externalities. The impact of economic transactions on third parties often affects people not involved in the transaction. These can be both positive or negative, but like in the case of pollution, if we don't account for the true costs of that pollution to society, we are going to overproduce these goods. So, a mantra you'll hear over and over from me in this course is that markets always work until they don't. And please remember that. Markets are fantastic. They are very efficient, but they do have failures. So when you compare the two systems side by side, in a market system, what is produced is determined by consumers. How to produce it is determined by the producer, who's trying to do it at the lowest cost. And for whom to produce is really determined by your purchasing power in the market, so prices. In a command economy, the government chooses what to produce, the government decides how to produce it, and they determine how it gets distributed. Very few economies in the world today could be characterized as pure market or pure command. They are, in fact, mixed. The United States operates on what we call a mixed free enterprise system. Now, to summarize this lesson, you're going to be logging into the Econ Lowdown and completing the video lesson and quiz on the circular flow model. Please remember to screenshot your final score and upload to Schoology when you're finished. There are also 2 video and video quizzes you'll be completing for assessment on this lesson. Crash Course Economics number 3 on economic systems, and the Econ movie number 10, which is going to look specifically at capitalism. In our next lesson, we're going to be reviewing the circular flow model in some more detail. And in our next video lesson, we're going to introduce the broad economic goals of government in our economy as we wrap up our first unit. As always, if you have any questions, please message me or see me in the live session. Until next time, have a great day.